Imagine standing on a pristine beach in southern Japan, the rhythmic sound of the Tokyo tide lapping at your feet as the sun begins to dip below the horizon. Suddenly, the sand itself seems to come alive. Thousands upon thousands of tiny, determined flippers begin to churn the earth, and a wave of life, 100,000 strong, begins its slow, heroic march toward the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. This wasn't just a beautiful moment for a nature documentary. This was one of the most ambitious and controversial ecological experiments in human history. Japan had just released a literal army of sea turtles into the wild, and while the goal was to save a disappearing species, what happened next at the coral reefs nearby was something no scientist, no environmentalist, and no government official had ever predicted. Instead of just swimming away into the deep blue, these turtles became the primary architects of a biological transformation that has completely upended our understanding of how the ocean heals itself. For decades, the coral reefs off the coast of the Japanese archipelago had been struggling. Rising temperatures and shifting currents had turned vibrant, colorful underwater cities into pale, quiet landscapes. We have all seen the footage of bleached reefs, those ghostly structures that look more like bone than living organisms. The traditional approach to saving them usually involves human intervention, planting lab-grown coral or installing artificial structures. But Japan decided to try something radical. They hypothesized that by restoring a top-tier grazer to the ecosystem, the sea turtle, they might be able to kickstart a natural recovery process that humans simply couldn't replicate. So they spent years nursing a massive population of green and hawksbill turtles in specialized sanctuaries, waiting for the perfect moment to execute the great release. The scale of the project was unprecedented. 100,000 turtles is a number so large it's hard to visualize. It is enough to cover entire beaches in a moving carpet of shells. On the day of the release, the energy was electric. Volunteers, scientists, and local fishing communities gathered to watch as the gates of the nurseries were opened. As those 100,000 hatchlings and juveniles hit the water, the immediate concern from some critics was that there wouldn't be enough food for them, or that they would simply be picked off by predators. But the ocean had a different plan. The turtles didn't just spread out. They headed straight for the struggling coral reefs like they were following an ancient, magnetic homing signal. Within just 6 months of the release, the first unexpected phenomenon began to occur. Coral reefs are often caught in a tug-of-war between coral polyps and aggressive algae. When a reef is stressed, the algae takes over, smothering the coral and preventing it from catching the light it needs to survive. It's like a garden being overgrown by weeds until the flowers disappear. Traditionally, small fish are supposed to eat this algae, but their populations had been depleted. Enter the 100,000 sea turtles. These animals are essentially the lawnmowers of the ocean. They began grazing on the thick, suffocating mats of algae, with a ferocity that stunned researchers. It was like watching a massive cleanup crew move in and start stripping away the grime from an old building. But here is where the story takes a turn that no one saw coming. Scientists expected the turtles to eat the algae, but they didn't expect the turtles' presence to change the actual chemistry of the reef's environment. As the turtles consumed massive amounts of seagrass and algae, their digestive systems processed these nutrients and returned them to the water in a highly concentrated, bioavailable form. This natural fertilizer didn't just help the coral, it triggered a bloom of beneficial microorganisms that had been absent for nearly half a century. The water clarity around the reefs improved drastically because these microorganisms began to filter out pollutants that the algae had previously been trapping. The most shocking discovery, however, happened about a year into the project. Divers noticed that the physical structure of the coral was changing. It wasn't just growing back, it was growing stronger. Usually, when a reef recovers, the new coral is fragile and prone to breaking, but the reefs visited by the massive turtle population were developing a density and a resilience that looked like ancient, healthy growth. Why? Because the turtles, as they grazed, were also cleaning the rocky surfaces of the reef with their beaks. This constant, gentle scraping removed the thin layer of silt and bacteria that usually prevents new coral larvae from successfully attaching to the seafloor. The turtles were effectively preparing the soil for a new generation of coral to take root. As the months turned into years, the project began to affect the entire Pacific food web. The return of the turtles attracted more biodiversity. Small crustacean species that had been hiding in the shadows of the overgrown algae were now exposed, attracting schools of foraging fish. These fish in turn attracted larger predators. The unexpected result wasn't just that the coral survived, It was that the entire ecosystem shifted from a state of collapse to a state of hyper-productivity. The reef wasn't just a reef anymore. It had become a biological engine, pumping life out into the surrounding ocean. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. A project of this magnitude brings with it a host of new challenges. With 100,000 new inhabitants, the local fishing industry was terrified. They feared that the turtles would get caught in nets or compete for the same resources that their commercial fish stocks relied on. What happened instead was a lesson in ecological balance. The healthier reefs actually led to an increase in the fish populations that the fishermen targeted. The turtles ended up protecting the very industry that feared them. This created a new kind of blue economy in Japan, where conservation and commerce finally stopped being enemies and started working as partners. The Japanese Sea Turtle Project also provided a goldmine of data for global climate scientists. By tracking a subset of these 100,000 turtles with satellite tags, researchers were able to see exactly how they navigated the changing currents of the Pacific. They found that the turtles were acting as mobile sensors, traveling to areas of the ocean where the water temperature was rising, and seeking out patches of seagrass that were previously unmapped. These turtles became our eyes and ears in the deep, showing us where the ocean was most vulnerable and where it was most resilient. One of the most beautiful aspects of this project was the community involvement. In Japan, the sea turtle, or Urashima taro as it is known in folklore, is a symbol of longevity and wisdom. The project tapped into this deep cultural respect. Schools across the country adopted individual turtles, following their journeys online. This created a generational shift in how people viewed the ocean. It wasn't just a resource to be exploited. It was a living entity that needed our help to regain its balance. The unexpected result at the reef was mirrored by an unexpected result on land, a massive surge in environmental literacy and passion among the youth. But let's look closer at the coral itself. There is a specific type of coral called acropora, which is known for its beautiful branch-like structures. It is also one of the most sensitive to temperature changes. Scientists had almost given up on seeing large-scale acropora fields in the Pacific again. However, in the areas where the turtle density was highest, the acropora didn't just return, it thrived. It turns out that the turtles' grazing patterns created small corridors of clear water and light that were perfect for this specific coral to grow in. It was like the turtles were subconsciously landscaping the reef to favor the most complex and beautiful coral species. The project also shed light on the concept of keystone species. We often think of apex predators like sharks or whales as the most important animals in the ocean, but the 100,000 sea turtles proved that the gardeners are just as vital. Without the turtles to manage the vegetation, the reef becomes a jungle of suffocating green. With them, it becomes a balanced metropolis of life. Japan's decision to focus on a herbivore rather than a predator was a stroke of genius that is now being studied by environmental agencies in Australia, the Caribbean, and the Maldives. The impact of the 100,000 turtles also reached the deep sea. As the reef became more productive, the marine snow, which is the organic material that sinks from the surface to the deep ocean, increased significantly. This provided a boost to the mysterious creatures that live in the dark, miles below the surface. The project proved that the ocean is not a series of isolated zones, but a single interconnected heart. When you heal a reef in Japan, the pulse of that health is felt at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. One of the most surprising scientific findings was the social nature of the reef's recovery. Scientists used underwater microphones to record the sound of the reef. A dying reef is quiet. It's a silent graveyard. But the reefs where the turtles were released became loud and chaotic within months. The sound of snapping shrimp, the grunts of fish, and the scraping of turtle beaks created a symphony of biological success. This sound itself is a signal to other marine life. Larvae of fish and coral use these sounds to navigate toward a healthy home. The turtles weren't just cleaning the reef, they were broadcasting its recovery to the rest of the ocean, inviting more life to join in. Of course, a project like this requires constant monitoring. Japan used a fleet of autonomous underwater drones to follow the turtles and map the reef's progress. This led to the development of new AI algorithms that can recognize different species of coral and measure their growth rates with millimeter precision. The technology developed for the Great Release is now being used to monitor coral health across the entire planet. The unexpected success of the turtles drove a technological revolution in marine biology that might be their greatest legacy. As the turtles grew and matured, they began to migrate. While many stayed near the Japanese reefs, others headed out toward Hawaii, the Philippines, and the west coast of the United States. This created a diplomatic bridge between nations. Sea turtles don't care about maritime borders. Their recovery became a shared goal for the entire Pacific Rim. Countries began to coordinate their marine protected areas to ensure that Japan's turtles had safe passage through international waters. A project that started on a small beach in Japan ended up creating a global network of ocean conservation. There were also interesting changes in the behavior of the turtles themselves. With such a high density of their own kind, the turtles began to display complex social interactions that had never been documented in the wild. They were seen working together to flip over large rocks to reach hidden algae or following each other to new grazing grounds. This suggests that sea turtles are far more intelligent and social than we ever suspected. They aren't just solitary travelers. They are part of a massive, coordinated community with its own culture and communication. The completely unexpected part of the story also involves the sand on the beaches. As the turtles returned to the shores to rest and eventually nest, they brought with them nutrients from the deep ocean. These nutrients fertilized the beach vegetation, strengthening the dunes that protect the coast from typhoons and rising sea levels. The sea turtles weren't just saving the reef. They were building a natural defense system for the land itself. This realization has led many coastal cities in Japan to rethink their urban planning, prioritizing natural habitats over concrete seawalls. Scientists are now looking at the microhabitats created on the turtles' shells themselves. Each of the 100,000 turtles carries a tiny ecosystem on its back. Barnacles, small crabs, and even specialized algae live on the shells. By releasing such a large number of turtles, Japan inadvertently seeded the ocean with millions of these microhabitats, providing a way for tiny species to travel thousands of miles across the open sea. It's like a massive fleet of biological buses, moving life across the Pacific in a way that had been missing since the great decline of sea turtle populations in the 20th century. The project hasn't been without its critics, however. Some marine biologists worry that such a large influx of a single species could overcorrect the ecosystem. They warn that too many turtles could eventually overgraze the seagrass beds, leading to a different kind of imbalance. But so far, the Pacific has shown a remarkable ability to absorb this new population. The predators, such as tiger sharks, have also seen a modest increase, keeping the turtle population in check and ensuring that the natural circle of life remains intact. One of the most profound lessons from the Great Release is the power of passive restoration. Instead of trying to fix every single piece of the reef ourselves, we simply provided the ocean with the tools it needed to fix itself. We often overestimate our ability to engineer ecosystems and underestimate the power of natural cycles. Japan's 100,000 turtles showed us that sometimes the best thing we can do for nature is to step back and let the original inhabitants take over the job. As we look toward the future, the success of the Japanese Sea Turtle Project provides a blueprint for other massive nature projects. We are seeing proposals for similar mega-releases of wolves in Europe, beavers in North America, and elephants in parts of Asia. The idea is simple. Find the species that does the most work for the environment, and give them the numbers they need to be effective. The 100,000 sea turtles prove that nature doesn't just recover in a linear way. It recovers in an exponential way when the right factors are in place. Today, the coral reefs of Japan are unrecognizable from the bleached skeletons of 20 years ago. They are vibrant, noisy, and teeming with life. The water is clear, the fish are plentiful, and the turtles are everywhere. Every time a new hatchling makes its way to the water, it is joining a legacy of recovery that saved an entire region from biological silence. The unexpected result at the reef was a message from the ocean itself, a message that says, "Give us a chance, and we will come back stronger than you ever imagined." The story of the 100,000 sea turtles is more than just a success story for one animal. It is a story about hope in the face of environmental crisis. It reminds us that big problems require big thinking and even bigger actions. Japan didn't just release a few hundred turtles and hope for the best. They committed to a scale that moved the needle for the entire planet. They showed the world that we have the power to change the narrative of loss into a narrative of abundance. When we look back on this era of conservation, the Japanese project will be remembered as the moment we stopped being afraid of large-scale intervention. It proved that if we act with wisdom, respect for folklore, and cutting-edge science, we can perform miracles. The Pacific Ocean is a big place, and it takes big efforts to heal its wounds. The 100,000 turtles were just the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship with the sea. As you listen to the waves the next time you are at the beach, think about those turtles. Think about the silent work they are doing under the surface, the gardening of the reefs, the fertilizing of the water, and the preparing of the future. The ocean is a living, breathing system, and we are just now learning how to speak its language. The sea turtles were the translators we needed all along. The reefs are now standing tall, a testament to what happens when we trust the natural order of things. They are no longer just survivors. They are champions. And the 100,000 sea turtles that started it all? They are still out there, swimming across the Pacific, carrying the secret of the reef's recovery on their backs, and proving every day that the most unexpected outcomes are often the most beautiful. This project has taught us that we are part of a global community that extends far beneath the waves. Every action we take has a ripple effect that we might not see for years. Japan's bold experiment changed the coral reefs of the Pacific, but it also changed us. It taught us to look deeper, to think bigger, and to never underestimate the power of a tiny flipper hitting the water for the first time. The ocean is full of mysteries, and the success of the sea turtles is just one of them. It encourages us to keep exploring, to keep questioning, and to keep protecting the wild spaces that remain. Because if 100,000 turtles can save a coral reef, imagine what we could do if we set our minds to healing the rest of the world. The journey of the turtles continues, and so does our journey toward a healthier, more balanced planet. Stay curious, stay hopeful, and always keep an eye on the horizon, because you never know when the next great wave of life will come marching out of the sea to change everything.